This is the first time I ever watched the extended television cut of King Kong 76, and I don't want to go into it much here because I plan on doing just a regular video on it, going into great detail. But I really didn't like the extended television cut. I was actually let down. Now, that's not me being picky. It's just a mixture of I'm so used to the edits of Kong 76, the theatrical cut, that watching this extended cut ruined the flow that I'm used to. It's kind of like the director's cut to Amadeus. I don't like the director's cut as much because in my humble opinion, it ruins the flow of the film itself. And if anything, the television cut tremendously feels like a rough cut to Kong 76. It's like it's got a lot of fat in it. And it'd be one thing if it had a lot of deleted scenes in it, like sequences that added to the character or to the lore or the myth of this island. But it really doesn't. And it has a few of those, and I want to be clear, I genuinely love those. There's a couple with Jack Prescott that I really love. There's one scene in particular between Dwan and Jack where he flat out says, if the monkey dies, we won't make it. That monkey, Kong, is going to be, harboring over us this entire time. And he's going to basically be dictating what our lives going forward, essentially. And that helps explain why he acts the way he does at the very ending of the movie after Kong dies. And he just stands there looking utterly, not bewildered, but utterly kind of disappointed and full of dread as Dwan cries out for him for help, and he just doesn't do anything. While in the theatrical cut, that scene genuinely kind of feels like needless 70s pessimism. So the extended cut genuinely fixed that problem for me. He totally says this is probably what's going to happen, and it does. And that fixed it. That fixed the ending for me. That fixed that particular part of the ending for me. So that was one thing that I liked about the extended television cut. But that's about it. Particularly the sacrifice scene, which I think is so perfectly paced in the theatrical cut. The extended cut just goes on and 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 on. And there's a couple of moments too where the sound design is just flat out different. One of the big ones being, and it's one of my favorite moments as well, is where the guy in the gorilla mask starts dancing in front of Dwan while she's all drugged out. And in the theatrical cut, suddenly John Barry adds these. It literally sounds like somebody banging on pots and pans, which might have been what it actually was. It's a really cool sound and sound cue for this guy. And they did it in both the front sacrifice and and when Dwan's actually being sacrificed. And in the extended cut, that's not there. That music cue isn't there. There's no sound effects there at all. It's just the continuous loop of John Barry's music. There's no added substance to it. So it really throws the pacing of the entire scene off. And then another thing that I really noticed is there is a lot more music in the in the extended television cut than in the television cut, or than in the theatrical cut, which is interesting because it's not new music. It's John Barry's score looped and retooled a bit and combined with other tracks and placed at different portions of the film to help try to fit the extended footage. And it feels just like that. There's one music track in particular that repeats a lot. A lot. And you're kind of like, okay, move on. And I'm like, if that, first off, John Barry's, that's my favorite of the Kong scores, is John Barry's amazing score. The fact that you made me roll my eyes and made me get sick of it, that means it definitely loops a lot. But the one scene in particular where I noticed that music really shouldn't be there, because in the theatrical cut there isn't, is actually during the sacrifice scene itself. It is when the crew of that ship land to try to rescue Dwan, and they're landing on the shores and they're running up the hills and stuff like that to try to get to the natives before they do something to Dwan. And in the theatrical cut, what you hear are these loud, blaring horns in the background. It's diegetic sound. There's no soundtrack underscoring that sequence until we cut back to the actual sacrifice itself. Now, in the television cut, this scene comes right after a commercial break. So the commercial break happens, and then when we come back, they're now landing on the island. There is now an underlying track to this scene that was featured much later on in the film itself. And to me, it kind of ruins the entire flow of that scene. And of course, that's what happens. That's what you have a television version of the movie. You have to make room for ads and stuff like that. That's not my problem. It just is more dramatic if we hear nothing but the diegetic sound itself over that of the the score behind it. We don't need the score there, because in many ways the extended cut to King Kong 76 really told me less is more, because let me tell you, Kong 76 is edited within an inch of its life, and I think it had to be, because there's just so much experimentation going on with that film, for good and for bad, special effects wise. So they had to be really careful with how it was edited, and it shows. I mean, the theatrical cut, I think, is very well paced. I think the editing is just top notch, and again, this extended television cut just feels like nothing but like a rough cut. Nevertheless, there's a lot more that I want to get into, but that'll be for another video. There is a lot of stuff that I want to talk about with that extended cut, because I'm very glad that I finally got to see it in full and completely restored, by the way. I know that there's a couple of moments where it says at the beginning, there's some scenes where it looks like somebody is talking when really they wasn't. That's because they weren't supposed to be on screen and stuff like that. I didn't really notice any of them. I noticed one, and then I noticed the other one, which was a special effects shot, which was Kong rampaging through the streets, picking up a car and throwing it into the building. That's actually a pretty famous deleted scene from the film. And I noticed that the flash that the explosion causes only fits a 4:3 aspect ratio, while the rest of it doesn't flash at all. And I'm like, oh, that's because it was specifically added in and edited to the television version, thus having it 235:1. There's information on the screen that wasn't meant to be seen, even though, yeah, it's a very odd situation here, because it's not like this was, supposed to be made for television and then turned into a theatrical film. No, this is a theatrical film then turned into a television movie. And I can't really think of anything else like that. Apparently this was shown with Jaws, and they didn't do an extended cut to Jaws from anything I've heard. So this is kind of interesting that they said we're going to do an extended 2-night event for King Kong, because that's what it is. It is split over the course of 2 nights. The first part is an hour and a half. Then there is about a 10-minute recap at the beginning of night 2. Then an hour and a half of episode 2. And so it is as a result, despite the movie structurally being the same, it feels like a very different film. In fact, I read one review of the television cut of Kong 76 and said it feels like a television movie, and I'm like, well, duh, because it's actually made for television. And I wasn't expecting to agree with him as much as I did. Like, there's a part of me, I think, that was thinking that this was just going to be an extended cut of the film. And that's just not really the case. There are curses that are still censored, which is fine. They just took the master from the TV cut. And whenever they say "God damn," they always censor the "God" in the "damn," because on TV back then, and even a little bit now, you can say "God," you can say "damn," but you can't say "God damn." So they always censored out the "God" and the "damn." And I also noticed, and this sort of is another example of how the editing in the in the theatrical cut is so poignant. It's so on the nose. It's so good. When Kong's getting killed, when the helicopters come in, and the editors wisely chose not to play any music during that sequence. It's nothing but the sound effects of the scene mixed with Dwan screaming and Jack screaming and Kong screaming and getting all bloodied, which apparently was a controversial thing. I guess a lot of people don't like the fact that they see Kong getting that bloodied. I personally like it because it's more gut wrenching. We're seeing this god, in essence, just getting totally destroyed by modern technology, which I thought sort of fit into the theme of that particular film a lot. But anyways, in the television cut, they actually censored a lot of that out. A lot of the shots of Kong getting shot are gone. They're absent. They're mixed. They're gone because apparently they were too gruesome for television. And as a result, Kong's death within the film isn't as gut wrenching. It doesn't hit you as hard, and it just feels off. Like, even if you weren't aware of the theatrical cut and how Kong dies in that, you would watch how it's edited in the television cut, and you would say something, they cut something out there. Like, you wouldn't have to really know. You just understand that, hey, they indeed cut something out there, and that's what I got out of it. So it was a rather interesting experience, to say the least, that this seeing the extended television cut for the first time. I am super glad that it's available, though. Do not get me wrong. That is not me saying, oh, I was so let down by it and everything like that. That is not what I mean in the slightest. I am tremendously happy that it was restored. That footage is now available in HD. And I am unbelievably happy that they would even try to restore that. And I'm also happy that they did a restore of the theatrical cut of King Kong. That's something that I was also very glad with.